Everyone, welcome to part two of operations with rational numbers. So in the previous lesson, we talked about how to simplify a fraction and how to convert between a mixed number and an improper fraction. Today, we're going to continue on with more operations that you can do with rational numbers. So, do I want a fraction or do I want a decimal? The first question I generally get asked is, which one is better? And there's not a great answer. Depending on the context is whether I'm going to want a decimal or an improper fraction or a mixed number. So if I'm writing slope, I haven't seen slope written as a decimal. Just seems wrong. If I'm baking, I'm probably going to see 4 1/3 cup. If I'm using money, I might see I have $4.30, not 4 3/10 dollars. So think about the situation. How do we normally represent the answer? And that's the form that you should probably put it in. They all will be equivalent. The decimal has a fraction equivalent, but sometimes it's just more natural to write the answer as a decimal or a fraction. So we're going to learn the process of how to convert between a fraction to a decimal and then go backwards decimal to a fraction. So our example is convert 1/4 into a decimal. So we need to see that this fraction bar is really a division bar. So convert 1 divided by 4. And we can do this one of two ways. So method number 1, use long division or a calculator. You put the numerator inside the house, the denominator goes outside the house, and you do long division. So 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. You can also do this on a calculator. Type 1 divided by 4, your calculator should give you the decimal. The second way is we write an equivalent fraction with a denominator being 10 or 100 or 1,000. Because if we can convert it to tenths or hundredths or thousandths, we can read it and we can write it. So 1/4, I can multiply in the numerator and the denominator by 25. So 1 times 25 is 25, and 4 times 25 is 100. And then I can read it as 25 hundredths. And this decimal is 25 hundredths because the 5 is in the hundredth spot. And this second method is really important because it's going to help us go from decimal to a fraction. So we might have a decimal convert 0.25 into a fraction. So step 1, you got to read the decimal correctly. So if you keep reading it as 0.25 or 0.25, you're not going to read it and hear it as a fraction. So we need to understand the place value. So 2 is in the tenths place and 5 is in the hundredths place. So since 5 is in the hundredths place, I read this as 25 hundredths. So 25 hundredths is 25 hundredths. And then we can use what we learned in the last lesson if the problem tells us to simplify. Okay, we can take 1 step or 2 steps. I saw and I used my divisibility rule of 5 at first, so divide numerator and denominator by 5. And then I can do it again and get 1/4. So if you can read it with correct terminology, then you can write it as a fraction. So that's how we go from fraction to decimal and from decimal to fraction.